Alright, hello, good morning, good evening, and good night. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fantastic because in today's video, we're going to be talking about a couple of the Yieldmax stocks. We're going to go over specifically Square, we're going to go over CONY, we're going to go over PYPY, if I can find that here, right here, which is the PayPal Yieldmax Option Income Strategy ETF, and we're also going to look at TSLY. And in today's video, it's so crazy. It's like we're going back in time here where we're doing the Yieldmax once again. So we're going to be looking at these stocks and ETFs because of the recent run-ups in their underlyings. Square is at a great marker in the past year or so. It's at pretty much an all-time high for the past year, which is very exciting, and I want to talk about that. We're going to talk about CONY and how COIN, the underlying stock, is also approaching pretty much a yearly all-time high, which is fantastic. I also want to talk a little bit about PayPal because PayPal is kind of on the verge of a little bit of a run-up. What I see is something similar in Square, so I want to talk a little bit about that too. And then obviously we can compare it to TSLY, and I'm going to use TSLY as kind of an example of what we don't want to see in a Yieldmax strategy. Although TSLY is a fund that I still do hold, I have about, I think, 100 shares to show. So if I could see, okay, now 70 shares because they did that stock split. But yeah, so what we'll do in this video is we'll show you some examples of what a great Yieldmax fund looks like and one that's kind of struggling that needs to kind of turn around. So if all sounds good, please do remember to subscribe. We're up to 4,205 subscribers. We gained like 10 subscribers in the past day. That is fantastic. So I want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed. Just recently put a video on Zim, also fantastic, and I'll link that one down below. Not down below, but at the end of this video if you stay to the end. So awesome. Let's talk about these funds. So why am I so excited to talk about, first of all, Square? Okay, when we're looking at Square, what I want to show you guys is kind of the max chart history. So Square in 2020 had a massive run up, something that I talk about quite a bit on this channel, and then it went pretty much back to levels before COVID. Now, when we're looking at the past year, you can see $80 is kind of like a marker where it's very difficult for Square to break. It hit 80, it went back down. It hit 80, went back down. And same in this marker here. It roughly hit about $80 or so, right, about a year ago, and went back down. But currently, for Square, what we've seen is we've seen it hit about $80. We've seen it trail back, but not completely down. That's the major thing. It's kind of consolidated at this level, about $65, $67 or so. Hit back up to 80, held there, and we're now pushing through $80. So this is something very exciting. This was the whole basis on why I decided to buy more shares of Square. I decided to buy 22 shares of Square because I seen this beautiful trend in the underlying stock. And for the Yieldmax version, SQY, they obviously, for the Yieldmax ETF strategy, what you want is a stock that slowly appreciates over the long term. This is fantastic for Yieldmax, even a bit slower, but of an uptrend, but an uptrend nonetheless will lead to an increase in the underlying and some huge dividends. I'm not sure if Square's dividends are as huge as they were like a while ago, but we can kind of see here if I go through Square's dividend, yeah, 32%, so nothing crazy. At a certain time, they were paying over 100% in dividends. That was obviously back when they had this huge run up here, but as you can see here, when we look at the 5-year calendar, Square has a lot of room to potentially grow. They are a $51 billion market cap company. I do like what they do in their underlying. They do kind of like what Visa does, but more for small businesses with their tap. And they have a great business model. And I do think there's definitely a lot of room to grow. So I'm not looking to sell any of my Square anytime soon, my SQY, the Yieldmax version. So that is why I'm super excited. And if we can break through this marker, maybe hit to $90, $100 in Square, we're going to see some great dividends once again for the Yieldmax version. So now going to the next, which is CONY. CONY is a stock that I do hold as well. I hold a very small position, only 4 shares. My average cost basis is about $25.47, which is kind of relatively high, but yet still the share price has kind of gone beyond that, which is great. So obviously due to the fact that COIN, the underlying stock, has just had such a massive run up in the past 6 months. Remember when COIN was sitting at $75? In the past 6 months, it's ran up to $270. What a trend. And obviously throughout this time, Coinbase, which is another Yieldmax fund, was also paying some pretty high dividends at the same time. It was paying about 160% in terms of dividends, which was absolutely crazy. If I can kind of go through and find that, it's nothing important here, but we can kind of see where their dividend is at right now. So when I click here, 72%. 72% is still fantastic. That is a crazy dividend. And of course, I'm back to SQY, so whatever. So going to CONY, the underlying stock, you can see here that it kind of had a high in December at about $30 or so. And that was back when the stock was roughly at pretty much the exact same marker, pretty much about 270, but they paid a couple dividends since then. So it's understandable that the Yieldmax version is a little bit less. But Coinbase, to be honest, I mentioned that I would sell my shares if, I had more than 4 shares, but I'd be looking to potentially cut my positions. I'm not necessarily sure how far Coinbase is going to run up. You can see here it's kind of approaching previous markers where it was, up to at one point $340 at a high. So there's still some room potentially left to grow for Coinbase, but at the same time, you got to understand that any kind of downtrends in the stock over the past, over the past little while, you could see in CONY have some pretty significant impacts. You could see, even though it didn't go down as much, the stock dropped about 33% or so right here, from $30 to $20, just off of this little blip here. If I can find that, this blip right here from December to January. So that's something to keep in mind when you're investing in the Yieldmax stocks, is that they could definitely take a turn for the worst at any point, and they can significantly go down in terms of their capital. So the next one that I want to talk about is PYPY. This is a PayPal Yieldmax Option Income Strategy ETF, and it's got a similar kind of stock chart to Square, the underlying stock for SQY. And the reason why I mention it is because if PayPal is able to break through the 65 marker or so, it's still kind of hovering about there, but if it's able to break through, then we could see a really great gain in PayPal, just as we've seen in Square. They have very similar long-term stock price charts, and so that's why I kind of reference them quite often. And so PayPal and PYPY is just something to kind of keep on your radar if you are potentially looking for a Yieldmax stock that could break out of a new high. It's still currently in a downtrend, so I can't confirm anything for you there, but definitely an interesting stock chart to keep kind of track of. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is TSLY. And the reason I'm talking about it, I own 70 shares, and the reason being is because this is kind of what you don't want to see in a Yieldmax ETF. You don't want to see the underlying continually making big moves to the downside, because what you're going to see is you're going to see the Yieldmax version taking all of that downside and barely getting any of that upside, which is what we see in TSLY. Now, Tesla, I do think long term it's going to be okay, so I'm not necessarily selling my shares of TSLY, but what I do think is that in the short term, if TSLY's price needs to recover, we need to see an uptrend in Tesla and a long uptrend in Tesla in order for that price to reach anywhere close to the average price at which I purchased it at, because I'm currently down about 40% on that position. So what we need is slow and steady appreciation in the underlying for the long term in order for these Yieldmax strategies to work. I do think we might see something in Square. Coinbase might be reaching kind of the end of its uptrend, but you never know where it's going to go from here. So just keep that all in mind. PayPal is something interesting too, and then TSLY, an example of kind of like the worst case scenario, but still you're obviously receiving those big dividends, so it's okay. So, well, it's not okay, but you know what, you get what I'm saying, right? Like, you see the downside, and then you kind of can prepare and expect if another Yieldmax stock does this as well. So I hope this video served you well. I try to give you guys value. If you guys did find you got value, we're up to 4,205 subscribers. Please don't hesitate to join our page. We talk about high dividends. We talk about low dividends now too. So we're going to talk about everything in terms of making money through dividends, through stocks, and through investing. So I want to say thank you guys for sticking with us. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.